Welcome to the Next Level Life I Love Mars edition. I'm Bill Hargenrader, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Robert Zubrin, from the founder and president of the Mars Society. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'm going to read you your bio here. It's very impressive, and I'm super excited. I'm a fan for a long time, but I'll just get started. Dr. Robert Zubrin is an American aerospace engineer and author of The Case for Mars, best known for his advocacy of the manned exploration of Mars. He was the driving force behind the Mars Direct, a proposal intended to produce significant reductions in the cost and complexity of such a mission. The key ideas was to use the Martian atmosphere to produce oxygen, water, and rocket propellant for the surface to stay and return journey. He is president of the Mars Society, pioneer astronautics, and pioneer energy. He has developed a number of concepts for space propulsion and exploration, and is the author of over 200 technical and non-technical papers and 5 books. Wow! Welcome again. So let's to start things off. So you started the Mars Society back in 1989.
No.
Okay. So let's maybe get a little history about that.
I started developing the Mars Direct plan in 1989. The Mars Society, I published the book The Case for Mars in 1996, which was an expanded explanation of the Mars Direct plan. And we got 4,000 letters from people who read the book from all over the world. It was an incredible assortment of people. You had engineers from JPL, you had astronauts, you had school teachers, you had firemen from Saskatoon and 12-year-old kids from Poland and a managing director of a major opera and bankers from Paris and a wife of a guy who won the Congressional Medal of Honor in World War II. And and you just looked at this assortment of talent of different kinds of people. And they were all saying different things, but ultimately they were all saying the same thing, which was, how do we make this happen? Yeah. If we could pull these people together, we could make something happen. So using those letters as our mailing list, we sent out letters inviting people to the founding convention of the Mars Society, which took place in August '98 at the University of Colorado Boulder. 700 people showed up, and we had a society. That's how the Mars Society got started.
Wow, no, that's cool. That's so that's before the internet was, it's for email, and before that, it just
there was email then, but it wasn't as important as it is now.
Yeah. No, that's impactful, and it's a lot of the same themes, exist today, where people are just, you ask some people, why we should go to Mars, and there's some logical reasons, but some people just have that in, like, it's part of who we are. We just need to go, and it's just amazing you're able to capture that and pull that together. So one of the things that we'd like to talk about on the show is books. I got lots of books back there, but what are some books maybe that, as you were growing up, or around the time that you were coming up with these ideas for Mars Direct, maybe something maybe science fiction or even not nonfiction? What are some books that maybe had an influence on you? If you can
okay. Well, I was an early reader. I could read before I went to school. And so I was 5 when Sputnik flew, and I was already reading science fiction then. And so for me, Sputnik was thrilling because it was saying to me that all these stories about adventures in space that I was reading about were going to be real. And so, that point I was in. And I read all the science and science fiction as a kid that I could get my hands on. And my father bought me a telescope, and we built rockets, and we did all this stuff, we're on board. And so what was I reading, when I was 10, 12 years old, this kind of thing? Yeah. Well, certainly Heinlein, Robert Heinlein's books. Heinlein, in particular, in my view, actually, Heinlein's best work are his juvenile novels, which, the boy with his slide rule and his Swiss Army knife and his self-reliance can go out into the universe and deal with it, okay? And so Red Planet, Have Spacesuit Will Travel, all that kind of stuff. And then a little older, Arthur Clarke, his short stories and his novels. And Earthlight, there's a great story, by the way, about the short novel Earthlight that I read at that time. And that I don't know exactly, well, I know when it was written, actually. but I read it in the 60s. However, Earthlight is a novel that it's about an intrigue that takes place in a lunar observatory during an interplanetary crisis where Mars is planning on seceding from Earth control. Okay,
right.
And the moon is kind of where both sides are mixing. And anyway, the observatory is at the crater Archimedes on the moon. And in 1970, Apollo astronauts visited the crater Archimedes. And one of them had read Earthlight too. And so he gets there and he proudly announces, you know, we are here now at the crater Archimedes, the site of Arthur Clarke's great novel Earthlight.
Right.
And wouldn't he be proud if he was alive today to know that we are now finally here? And now, of course, Arthur Clarke was alive in 1970. And so he wrote a comment that got published, and he said, well, I certainly am, okay, but I wrote that novel in 1940 when I was manning a radar station in England during the Blitz and staying up at night and writing to have something to do. And if anybody had told me then that 30 years later people would be walking on the moon in this place that I was writing about, I would have thought it was the most wild poppycock imaginable. That's what he said. Think about it, 1940 to 1970, 30 years. It's now 45 years since 1970. Okay, enormous progress between 1940 and 1970. Where have we gone in space since 1970? Okay, so it's an amazing thing. Yeah. But it also says that, you know, if you look at how slow things have gone for the past 20, 30, 40 years, there's, you know, one looks ahead and one is pessimistic. But who would have thought in 1940, in the middle of the Battle of Britain, that people would be walking on the moon 30 years later? And so here we are in this somewhat screwed up world, but for all we know, 10 years from now, people will be walking on Mars.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's I mean, you're the work that you've done, Mars Direct. We have actually have created a Facebook page, I Love Mars, and there's about 12,000 people on there now. And when I posted that we're doing an interview with you today, like, people were just like, let them know that, you know, the big influence on me, on why I think we should be going, and not just why I think we should be going, but actually putting out, you know, actionable steps. Mm-hmm. You know? So it's nice to say we can go and write about it, but you're actually doing something, you know, about it and putting that to work. So definitely, you know, that's well noted. That's so talking about science fiction. What are maybe some fiction or non-fiction books? What are some things that you know, obviously you've written a large number of technical papers, but anybody in particular that influenced you?
Well, once again, in my youth, Heinlein certainly, and Clarke, lesser extent Asimov.
Okay.
The little older Carl Sagan, and his nonfiction. His fiction is not terribly important, but his nonfiction is, and the various books that he wrote, including not only the famous one Cosmos and the Dragons of Eden, but a book that he wrote together with a Russian scientist, Tsiolkovsky, about the search for life in the universe, yeah. Which is a more technical work, but which is really fascinating if you're up for it. So sure.
No, those are good ones. Definitely. Yeah. And so basically, it's kind of leading into there's a movie coming out called The Martian. Have you heard of this movie?
Sure, and I've read the book.
Okay. And you had Andy Weir at the Mars Society convention, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So where are your? I mean, I'm super excited. So about I read the book, love the book. Super excited for the movie. And part of me, the optimist, the humanity optimist in me, is saying this is a type of movie that can, you know, kind of cross that boundary between entertainment and inspiration. So not just going to see a movie about Mars and there's like zombies on Mars or ghosts on Mars. It's almost like where Mars is like, you know, like a co-lead. Do you have any optimism or thoughts that this is a type of?
Well, okay, this movie is historic in that this is the first Mars movie. Okay. There have been other movies that, for instance, you've alluded to with Ghosts on Mars and so forth, but they were just horror pictures set on Mars, or perhaps shoot 'em ups set on Mars, or in one case, a Journey to the Great Reveal, King Solomon's Mines remake kind of movie set on Mars. But there's been no movie to date until now that actually deals with it. Here it is, we're on a human mission to Mars. What kind of trouble might we get into, and how could we actually deal with it? Okay, there's no magic in this movie. There's no extraterrestrials. There just isn't even Nazis. Okay, there's just a human mission to Mars trying to use its wit and its grit to figure out how to get itself out of a jam. So it is the first Mars movie.
Yeah.
Now, it's not the first Mars novel. There have been a number of good Mars novels written. I wrote one, First Landing. Kim Stanley Robinson read Mars. Greg Benford, The Martian Race. Jeff Landis, I believe it's called Moving Mars. All good novels, but on the screen, which is really the central art form of our society right now. It's, you know, a good novel, a successful novel, 100,000 people might read it. A reasonably successful movie might be seen by 100 million people, okay? And a truly successful movie like Titanic, over 1 billion people.
Yeah.
And I think this might be more in the latter category. So this is the first Mars movie, and so the more people are going to see this by a factor of 1,000 than have read all the Mars novels to date. So this is the first time that the mass culture will meet Mars. And people will be able to see with their eyes a little bit of the vision that people, those of us in the Mars community, have been trying to see with our mind for the past 4 decades. That's what art does.
Yeah.
It reveals to the eyes what must initially be seen first with the mind. And that's what this will begin to do. And I hope, of course, that this movie establishes the Mars movie as a genre. This, of course, is not the only potential situation or type of characters or type of people that might be on Mars. And just as there's been innumerable Westerns and World War II movies and so forth, I hope that there's innumerable Mars movies, good ones, that explore this from all angles. And certainly if this movie is a great success, the chances for that will be high.
Yeah, no, that's I got a funny little story about that, because I just published my first short story called Mars Journey, Call to Action, and basically I came with this idea about what it will take to get to Mars internationally, you know, pulling together with different countries we normally wouldn't work with, pulling commercial organizations with nonprofits. And I started writing the story out last summer, and I was telling someone, and they're like, "Hey, have you heard about The Martian?" And I'm like, no, I haven't. And I read The Martian, and I was like, oh, crap, the idea is gone. But the idea is not gone. It's just one possible story. It's like you said, it's like a Western, you know, it's like the next genre of Mars. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's kind of opening the doorway for that. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So then I know that you do not a lot of work. You got Pioneer Energy, Pioneer Astronautics, Mars Society. They're seemingly potentially different, but they all are somewhat interconnected. So I guess my question is more, how do you juggle all the different things? I'm big into productivity. With great difficulty. All right. Right now, the majority of my time is consumed by Pioneer Energy. It's a bigger operation than the others, and it's poised to break out. We've invented and now putting out in the field technology for capturing natural gas liquids out of flare gas. So you take things like propane and butane and pentane that right now is going up in smoke. We'll capture it out of the flare, and it can be fuel that's put to use, reduces pollution, and creates new resources. So we actually have right now 5 machines built and deployed in North Dakota, where they're working away, and if people want to find out about it, go to pioneerenergy.com. Pioneer Astronautics is an R&D company, and actually the initial technology for energy came out of Astronautics. It does contracts for NASA primarily. We did a little for the Air Force. But if people want to know, some of the
benefits on Earth of space technology research. Here's a technology that's now going to turn pollution into fuel. And that's one part of it. And of course, it's only one of thousands of examples. And actually, I think the real benefit we get on Earth for the space program in terms of the near term is not even the technology, but the intellectual capital, the millions of young people it encourages to go into science and engineering. And then they make inventions and all sorts of things. They might not even end up in the space program. Most of them don't. But I mean, who were the 40-year-old technological entrepreneurs who built Silicon Valley in the 1990s? They were the 12-year-old little boy mad scientists making rocket fuel in the basement in the 1960s. Yeah. And so, so there it is. And then there's the Mars Society, which is a nonprofit. No one in the Mars Society draws a salary, not me, not anyone. But that exists to promote Mars exploration, both through outreach and political work and through our stations. We have 2 Mars stations, one in the Arctic and one in the American desert, where people can go and practice Mars missions and find out what's likely to work on Mars and what isn't. And at this point, we've had over 165 missions between the 2 stations of 6 people each. So it's 1,000 people have been a member of a crew of one station or the other at one time or another.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, so basically, we're going to kind of tie that into some questions that we have. A little bit of feedback. I think it's gone now. We can tie that in some questions that we have from the I Love Mars Facebook page, and one is from Andy Frankenhauser. And it ties into what you're basically saying, but what are some things that you're doing or that the Mars Society is doing or that we can do to foster and encourage the continuous desire in kids to become the first Martians?
Well, the best thing we can do is to have a Humans to Mars program so that they can understand that if they learn their science, they can be a pioneer of new worlds. Out of that challenge to adventure, we get millions of young scientists and inventors and doctors and medical researchers and inventors and technological entrepreneurs. You get a huge surge of human progress from that intellectual capital. That's actually what we got out of Apollo. As a result of Apollo, the number of science graduates in this country doubled at every level, high school, college, PhD. And we're still reaping the benefits of that, which have been phenomenal. But beyond that, until we have such a program, simply establishing the idea of it, putting in people's minds. That's one of the things the Martian will help do as well. It'll say to people who see this, hey, if I learn my science, I could be a part of something like that. Yeah. Because youth loves adventure and youth wants to do something heroic and grand. And if we make science the great adventure, that's where youth will go.
I like that. Science, the great adventure. It's awesome. It's a great tie-in. And then we have Matt Austin, who's actually a contributor at I Love Mars. He's curious about what are your views on the next 20, 30 years. I know you and I guess both of the idea is that the sooner the better. But the way things look right now, where do you see us getting to Mars the next 20 years, 30 years?
Well, this brings us back to Arthur Clarke sitting there writing the Earthlight during the Battle of Britain. The way things looked then, it didn't look like we had much of a future. The way things look right now, it could be a long time. But I think we're going to turn a corner here. I think there are things that are coming together that are going to change the picture. Look, right now, NASA's adrift. NASA says they want to send people to Mars in the year 2043. They might as well say 3043. Right. Okay. Because you say you're going to do something in the year 2043, you're basically saying, I'm going to let somebody else do it. That's what you're saying. Okay. Because almost no one in NASA, certainly no one in a middle rank position or higher, is going to be. And none of the politicians that approved whatever plan they put forward this year is going to be in office in 2043. Yeah. I mean, really, it's absurd. But but things are going to change. There are things happening that are good behind the scenes. One that's up front, the one part of NASA that is functional is the robotic exploration program. And they will continue to return information about Mars that are going to make Mars increasingly interesting, increasingly suspect as an abode for life, past, present, and future. So that's happening. That's one part of it. But outside of NASA, probably the most encouraging development is SpaceX, which is developing space hardware, showing that they can develop space hardware at 1/10 the development cost and 1/3 the scheduled time that has become accepted by NASA and the major aerospace contractors. And not only that, they're actually developing important chunks of the hardware set needed to send humans to Mars. The Dragon capsule, for example, is rated for a return to Earth from Mars, not just from Earth orbit. Musk designed it that way on purpose. They're in the process of developing a heavy lift vehicle, which is the largest single piece of hardware needed for humans to Mars. And not just a heavy lift vehicle, one that will have a reusable first stage. So it'll not only be able to lift large payloads, but do it cheap. Okay, so now you have two major hardware elements, and there'll be others. And the more of these that are there, the more when you present this as a proposition to the political class, it becomes less forbidding, because, in other words, the Augustine Commission killed Bush's moon program by claiming a heavy lift vehicle would cost $36 billion to develop. Musk is going to do it for about $3 billion. And after it's done, there won't be any argument over how much it's going to cost, because it will have been developed, period, full stop. It's no longer on the menu. So this will make it increasingly palatable. Then you have the international situation, which on one level is becoming increasingly difficult. Okay. In other words, in the 90s, somebody wrote a book called The End of History. The great struggle of ideas is over. Liberal capitalism has won. There's nothing left to be done. We can now just sit back, maybe go to the mall, buy something cool. Okay, now we're being challenged again by Putin, by China, by the Islamists. And each in their own way are saying, you guys are the past. Okay, just like the communists were saying in the 1950s. And Kennedy answered them. He said, we're going to astonish the world with what free people can do. And that's exactly what they did. And that same need is now going to be there again. There's going to be a need once again for NASA to play a role in astonishing the world with what free people can do. They'll have to get off their butts. They'll have to stop making excuses. Oh, it's too dangerous. We won't go to Mars till it's safe. Like it's ever going to be safe or ever safe the first time. Okay. Can imagine if Lewis and Clark said, yeah, we'd like to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific, but please assure us it's going to be safe.
All right.
Okay. Can we do this? Can we certify all the Indian tribes we're going to meet are all friendly and, do we have this nailed down? Okay. Now, so NASA is going to, the nation is going to be put through the test again. And I'm a believer in America. I think, we're like the hare in the tortoise and the hare story. We go to sleep when we think we're ahead of the game. But unlike the hare, I think we get up in time when we see the challenge that we take off and go. This country was totally messed up during the 1930s. And yet when World War II happened, we rose to the challenge. By 1944, we were producing an aircraft carrier a week. And then once again, we got split-nicked, but look how we came back. And I think that while it seems that we have become a nation that has abandoned its pioneer ethos, I think that's only on the surface. And I think that when the challenge is there, we will wake up and we will take it. And then finally, there is the literature and the movie, The Martian. The fact that this is going to be put out there in the popular culture is something that's waiting to happen. That's something that we should make happen. And, this is going to put it front and center. And I don't know if this movie alone will do it, but I think this movie is going to establish a genre of movies. It's going to make Mars a part of the mass culture. Yeah. And people will know that this is something that, we need to do. And that a president that who is not making significant steps towards this will be called on it. So I don't know whether that'll be our next president. Donald Trump has poo-pooed the idea of humans to Mars. But I think he's headed for a dive, and we might have somebody a bit more intelligent as president. And if not then in 2020, this thing's going to get going.
Yeah.
And by then, the SpaceX hardware will be more available, and more and more people will have been recruited to the idea. I think it's going to happen. I think that we won't have to wait till 2043 to go on Mars. I think we'll be on Mars in the 2020s.
Well, that's great. And I like the concept, the aspect of public awareness and public support, which drives politics. So the more people are aware, the more people that think we should be going, the more those type of policies and funding that will be allocated towards that. So no, I totally agree. So then your time's valuable. We're about 30-minute point here. So wanted to say actually Ron Sparkman from I Love Mars contributor and also Upworthy. He went to the Mars Society convention. He just wanted me to let you know that it was an amazing experience. I was in France at the time, so I couldn't go. But are these events getting bigger? Well,
sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they're smaller. I think next one will be bigger. It's going to be in Washington again, and it's going to be in September. In other words, we intend to go to the center of the political firestorm in the center of the season, so that we will, as it were, present the, we're going to go among the heathens and spread the news. And so that's where it's going to be. I think it's going to be something. It's going to be time to occur close to the time of the landing of a NASA probe on Mars, InSight. It's going to land late in September. So there'll be that, raising the game as well. So yeah, and we intend to have a lot more debates. The high point of this year's convention, I think, were the debates. Yeah. And we're going to have a lot more of them, because the truth will set us free. And the only way to get the truth out into the open is to have it out. And so there's a lot of things that need to be discussed. And we're going to discuss them. And the sides that don't show up for the debate, people will know that they're the ones that can't defend what they have to say.
There you go. So as we wrap this up, I'd like to, if you could just let people watching, let them know how they can join the Mars Society, what benefits or what good that will do.
Okay, first of all, there's a book called The Case for Mars, which is the book that I've written about how we can send humans to Mars and why we must. And it takes it from the first human mission through building the base, through Mars settlement, and even terraforming. And then beyond that, what the significance is of having an open frontier on Mars for our society, to keep us from becoming stagnant and bureaucratic, and to maintain an outlook of openness and that values every additional person because of the contributions they can make, because it's a society that knows that it is people who create wealth, people who go to Mars and create a world, an inhabitable world from a desert, and that, wealth doesn't come from natural resources. It comes from human ingenuity, human potential. So that's my book. And then, yes, they should join the Mars Society. We have a website at marssociety.org. And there's a lot of ways people can get involved in the Mars Society. We've got contests going on. We're going to have a rover contest, building rovers, take to the desert, see which ones do the best exploration tasks in the desert. We're having a contest for university engineering students. We call it the Gemini Mars Contest. It's to design a two-person Mars flyby mission, and which is something that could be done significantly sooner than actually landing people on Mars. It could easily be done before the end of the next president's second term. And we call it Gemini Mars because it's meant to have the same relationship to humans on Mars as Gemini had to the Apollo missions to go to the moon. There's the convention, and people can submit abstracts and come and speak at the convention and have their ideas circulate and potentially contribute to the wealth of ideas on how we can address various problems associated with the exploration and settlement of Mars. There's all sorts of things that people can do. They can volunteer to be a crew member at the Mars Desert Research Station.
Nice.
This season is booked up, but the 2016-2017 season is going to be open for volunteers. They can be part of a crew. So there's a lot people can do. So join the Mars Society and help make it happen.
Well, there you go. Do what he says. So, I just want to thank you so much for your time. It's been a true pleasure. Thank you so much. And we're going to wrap this up. Yep. We're going to wrap this up. So if you like what you saw, give a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.
Bye.